The man standing in the shadows was watching his own funeral. Rain poured over the quiet cemetery, soaking the expensive black suits of the mourners. A large, heavy tombstone stood at the center of the crowd. It read, "Lorenzo Moretti, the Iron Lion." Everyone believed the legendary Mafia boss was inside the casket, buried deep in the mud. But Lorenzo was not in the grave. He was standing 50 yards away, hidden behind a stone wall. He wore a hooded coat and kept his face down. His heart felt heavy, but he had to see the truth. He had faked his memory loss and then his death to test his family. He wanted to know if they loved him or his money. At first, it was heartbreaking. His wife, Isabella, leaned against the casket, her body shaking with sobs. His children, Bianca and Enzo, held each other and looked destroyed. Lorenzo felt a sharp sting of regret. Maybe I was too hard on them, he thought. Maybe they really do care. Then the service ended. The priest left, and the guests walked back to their cars. As soon as the family was alone, the tears stopped instantly. Isabella straightened her back and wiped her face. She didn't look sad anymore. She looked bored. "Finally," she whispered, her voice cold and sharp. "Now that the old man is officially dead, we can finally take everything back." Bianca let out a loud, mocking laugh. It was a sound Lorenzo had never heard from his daughter before. "I thought I was going to die of boredom," she said, checking her makeup in a small mirror. "I deserve every penny for sitting through that." Enzo didn't even look at the grave. He was staring at his phone screen. "The bank alert just hit. The accounts are unlocking. We are richer than we've ever been." Lorenzo felt like he had been stabbed in the chest. They weren't mourning a father. They were celebrating a jackpot. They didn't just betray him. They had erased him from their lives the moment they thought he was gone. His fist tightened until his skin turned white. He realized he had raised monsters. They were using his name to steal power, but they didn't want the man who built the empire. Suddenly, a tall man stepped out of the shadows next to Lorenzo. It was a face from his past. "Welcome back, Mr. Moretti," his voice whispered, his eyes fixed on the laughing family. "Are you ready for your second test?" Lorenzo didn't look away from his children. "The first test was for them," he growled. "The second test is for me." Before the story takes a darker turn, I just want to say thank you to everyone supporting this channel. Your likes, your time, your presence here, it means everything. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be the perfect moment, because what's coming next, you don't want to miss it. Lorenzo watched from the shadows as his family's luxury car sped away, splashing mud onto his own gravestone. He stood alone in the rain, a dead man walking. He reached into his pocket to grab his phone, wanting to call his offshore banker. He needed to move his private funds before Isabella found them. But when he pressed the button, the screen stayed black. He tried again. Nothing. "It won't work, Mr. Moretti," a voice said from behind him. Lorenzo spun around. It was Marco, his most loyal security chief. Marco was the only person who knew the truth about the faked death. But Marco didn't look like a loyal servant today. He looked like a man holding all the cards. "What did you do to my phone?" Lorenzo growled, his voice like grinding stones. "I didn't do anything," Marco said, stepping into the light. "Your wife did. The moment the death certificate was signed an hour ago, she used her power as your widow to shut down every device linked to your name. Your phone, your GPS, your private email. You don't exist anymore, boss." Lorenzo felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the rain. "I have my backup codes. I'll just go to the main office. The fingerprint scanner will let me in." Marco shook his head slowly. "That's the problem. To the world, Lorenzo Moretti is dead. If you walk into that building, the system will flag you as an intruder. The guards, the men you paid for years, have new orders. Isabella told them that if anyone claims to be you, they are to be removed, permanently." Lorenzo realized the trap was tighter than he thought. He had faked his death to test their hearts, but Isabella had used his death to steal his life. She hadn't just taken his money, she had deleted his identity. "I still have the safe house in the city," Lorenzo muttered, thinking fast. "The emergency cash is there." "Isabella changed the locks this morning," Marco replied. Lorenzo looked at his hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. He was the man who had built an empire from nothing, and now he was standing in a graveyard with $0 and no name. He was a ghost in his own kingdom. "They think I'm a memory," Lorenzo said, a dark smile finally touching his lips. "They think the lion is gone. But they forgot one thing." "What's that?" Marco asked. "A ghost doesn't have to follow the rules," Lorenzo whispered. "If they play a game where I don't exist, then I'll show them how much damage a dead man can do." Lorenzo didn't go to a hotel or a friend. He couldn't. Instead, he walked through the dark, narrow back streets of the city until he reached a small, quiet neighborhood. This was far away from the marble statues and golden gates of his mansion. He stopped in front of a modest house with a bright blue door. This was the home of Martha, the woman who had been his head maid for 30 years. To the rest of the family, she was just someone who cleaned floors. To Lorenzo, she was the only person who had ever been honest with him. When he faked his amnesia, Martha was the only one who sat by his bed and read to him. She didn't ask about his bank accounts, she only asked if he was in pain. Lorenzo knocked on the door, it swung open, and Martha stood there. She looked older than he remembered. Her hair was gray and her eyes were tired. When she saw him, she dropped the tray of tea she was holding. The glass shattered against the floor. "Mr. Moretti," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But the news, the funeral." "I'm alive, Martha," Lorenzo said quietly. She didn't scream, she didn't call the police. She grabbed his arm and pulled him inside, locking the door behind him. She burst into tears, hugging him like a lost son. But after a moment, she stepped back and wiped her eyes. Her face turned serious. "You shouldn't have come back, sir. They are worse now than they ever were." Lorenzo looked around the room. It was filled with files and folders. "I thought you retired, Martha. What is all this?" "I didn't retire," Martha said, pointing to a computer screen. "I've been watching them. After you died, I used the money you gave me years ago to start a small foundation. I told everyone it was for charity, but I really used it to keep an eye on your family. I knew they would try to destroy your legacy." She turned the computer screen toward him. It showed security footage from a hidden camera inside the Moretti mansion. Lorenzo leaned in, his eyes narrowing. In the video, Enzo and Bianca were sitting in his old office. They weren't just talking about money. They were meeting with men Lorenzo had spent years keeping away from the city, violent men who dealt in fear and shadows. "They aren't just spending your money, Lorenzo," Martha whispered. "They are inviting the devils you kicked out back into our home. They are making deals that will get innocent people killed." Lorenzo felt a cold fire burn in his chest. He had faked his death to see if they loved him. Now he saw the truth. They were turning his kingdom into a graveyard. They think the Iron Lion is dead, Lorenzo said, staring at the screen. Show me everything, Martha. It's time to see just how deep their rot goes. Martha's small living room was quiet, except for the hum of the computer. Lorenzo stared at the screen, his eyes fixed on his children. On the video, Enzo was leaning back in Lorenzo's favorite leather chair. He had a cigar in one hand and a glass of expensive scotch in the other. He looked like he was playing dress-up in a king's clothes. "The deal is simple," Enzo said to a man sitting across from him. The man on the screen was Viktor Volkov, a rival who Lorenzo had chased out of the country 10 years ago. Volkov was a cruel man who didn't care about rules or loyalty. "You give us the shipping codes for the northern docks," Volkov growled. "In exchange, I make sure the other families don't try to take your territory now that your father is gone." "Done," Enzo replied without hesitating. Lorenzo felt a surge of fury. Those docks were the heart of his business. He had promised the workers there that they would never have to deal with men like Volkov. With one signature, Enzo was throwing hundreds of families to the wolves just to save his own skin. Then Bianca walked into the frame. She wasn't carrying a mirror this time. She was carrying a stack of legal papers. "I've finished the paperwork for the amnesia clause," she said, sliding the documents toward Volkov. "What is that?" Volkov asked, flipping through the pages. "It's a lie we told the board of directors," Bianca explained with a cold smirk. "We told them that before Dad died, his memory loss made him sign over all his secret personal assets to us. It's a total forgery, of course, but with him dead, who's going to stop us? The old maid?" The three of them laughed. The sound was like nails on the chalkboard to Lorenzo. They weren't just taking his money, they were framing him as his confused self to steal the last of his private legacy. They were painting him as a weak, broken man to justify their theft. "I've seen enough," Lorenzo whispered. He turned to Martha. "Do you still have the old keys to the service tunnels under the mansion?" Martha nodded, reaching into a dusty wooden box. She pulled out a heavy brass key. "I kept them just in case. But Lorenzo, there are dozens of guards there now. Volkov's men are everywhere. It's a suicide mission." "They think they're dealing with a memory," Lorenzo said, taking the key. His eyes were cold and focused. "But they're about to find out that a ghost can still strike. I built that house. I know every shadow in it, and tonight those shadows are coming for them." The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with fog as Lorenzo stood in the dark woods behind his family mansion. The massive house was glowing with golden lights. Music and laughter spilled out onto the lawn. It was a victory party celebrating the death of the Iron Lion and the birth of a new, greedy empire. Lorenzo felt like a ghost as he moved toward a hidden stone hatch near the old garden. He fit the brass key into the lock. With a heavy groan, the secret door opened. He climbed down into the narrow, dusty tunnels he had built years ago for emergencies. He moved silently, his heart beating in sync with the muffled thumping of the music above. He reached the master control room, a tiny closet hidden behind a bookshelf in his old study. Through a small peephole, Lorenzo saw Bianca standing in the middle of the room. She was holding a diamond necklace up to the light. "I can't believe Dad kept this in the safe for so long," she bragged to a friend. "He was so stingy at the end. Now it's finally mine." Lorenzo didn't burst through the door. That wasn't the plan. Instead, he reached for the main computer terminal in the wall. He entered a code that only he knew. Suddenly, every light in the mansion flickered and died. The music cut off into a haunting silence. The guests gasped in the dark. "Enzo, fix the generator!" Isabella shouted from the hallway. But Lorenzo wasn't finished. He tapped a command on the screen. A hidden speaker in the study crackled to life. It played a recording from 3 years ago, Lorenzo's own voice, deep and powerful. "A house built on lies will always fall," the recording boomed. Bianca screamed, dropping the necklace. "Who's there? Who played that?" Lorenzo watched through the peephole as Enzo ran into the room, holding a flashlight. The beam shook in his hand. "The system is crashing, Bianca. Our offshore accounts, they're being frozen. Someone is using Dad's private override codes." "That's impossible," Isabella yelled, rushing in behind them. "He's dead. We saw the casket go into the ground." Lorenzo smiled in the dark. He wasn't just taking their money, he was taking their peace of mind. He began to cycle the security shutters, making the heavy metal plates slam shut over the windows one by one. Bang, bang, bang. The family huddled together in the center of the room. They looked like terrified children, not powerful criminals. "What if he's not actually dead?" Bianca whispered, her voice trembling. Lorenzo leaned closer to the wall. "The first test showed your greed," he whispered into the ventilation duct, knowing they would hear it as a ghostly echo. "The second will reveal your truth." The mansion felt like a tomb. The heavy metal shutters had turned the beautiful home into a giant iron box. Inside, the air was getting thin, and the only light came from the flickering beams of Enzo's flashlight. "This isn't a ghost," Enzo shouted, though his voice was shaking. "It's a hack. Someone stole Dad's codes before he died. It's probably Volkov trying to scare us so he can take a bigger cut." Isabella grabbed his arm, her fingernails digging into his suit. "Volkov doesn't have those codes, Enzo. Only your father knew the override for the shutters. Only he knew how to talk to the house like it was alive." Suddenly, every phone in the room buzzed at the same time. The screens lit up with a bright, blinding white light. A single message appeared on every device. "The first test showed your greed. The second will reveal your truth." Bianca let out a small, terrified sob. "It's him! He's back! He's watching us right now!" "Shut up, Bianca," Enzo snapped. But he kept spinning around, looking for a camera. "He's dead. We saw the body. Well, we saw the casket. We signed the papers. Dead men don't send text messages." But the fear was already spreading like a virus. Enzo looked at Isabella. "Wait, Mom, you were the last one to see him at the hospital before the crash. Are you sure he was in that car?" Isabella's eyes went wide. "What are you saying? That I lied to you?" "You wanted the money more than anyone," Enzo yelled. "Maybe you hid him away. Maybe you're playing this game to get me and Bianca out of the way so you can have it all." "How dare you!" Isabella screamed, slapping him across the face. The sound echoed through the silent house. "I did everything for this family. I forged those papers to keep us rich." "You did it for yourself," Bianca joined in, her voice high and panicked. "I saw you talking to the lawyer in private, Mom. You were trying to cut us out of the offshore accounts." Lorenzo watched from behind the wall, his heart turning to stone. They were already tearing each other apart. He didn't even have to lift a finger. Their own guilt and greed were doing the work for him. He reached for the control panel one last time. He triggered the final sequence. The lights didn't come back on. Instead, the wall monitors flickered to life, showing a live map of the city. A red dot was blinking at the location of their old family mansion, the one that had burned down years ago in a freak accident that had almost killed Lorenzo. A new message appeared on the screens. "The truth lives in the ashes. Meet me where it started." "He's summoning us," Bianca whispered, her face pale. "We have to go," Isabella said, her voice hollow. "If we don't, He'll delete every cent we have left. He's not just haunting us, he's hunting us." The old family estate was a skeleton of blackened wood and shattered stone. It had sat empty for years, a dark reminder of the fire that nearly took Lorenzo's life. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long, twisted shadows across the overgrown grass. A black SUV pulled up to the rusted iron gates. Isabella, Enzo, and Bianca stepped out. They looked small and terrified in the vast, silent ruins. The only sound was the crunch of dead leaves under their expensive shoes. "Why here?" Bianca whispered, clutching her coat. "This place gives me the creeps. It smells like smoke even after all this time." "Because this is where he almost died the first time," Enzo said, his voice cracking. "He's trying to remind us of what he survived." Suddenly, a bright spotlight cut through the darkness. It was coming from the second floor of the ruined mansion where the master bedroom used to be. A silhouette stood in the center of the light, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a cane. "Is it really you?" Isabella shouted, her voice trembling. "Lorenzo? If you're alive, come down here. Stop playing these sick games." The figure didn't move. Instead, a voice boomed from hidden speakers hidden in the trees. It wasn't a recording this time. It was live. "You said you were glad I was gone, Isabella," the voice said. It was cold and steady and steady. "You called me a pathetic old lion, Bianca. And you, Enzo, you sold my docks to a butcher like Volkov before my body was even cold." The three of them froze. There was no denying it now. Lorenzo was alive, and he heard every word of their betrayal at the cemetery. "Dad, please," Enzo yelled, stepping forward. "We were just scared. We didn't know what to do without you. We had to protect the business." "You didn't protect the business," Lorenzo's voice growled. "You fed it to the sharks. You didn't mourn a father. You celebrated a paycheck." Lorenzo stepped out of the spotlight and walked slowly down the charred wooden stairs. He looked older, and he walked with a slight limp, but his eyes were sharper than ever. He looked like a king returning to a kingdom that had forgotten him. He stopped 10 feet away from them. He held a small remote in his hand. "I gave you a second test. I wanted to see if the fear of losing me would make you realize your mistakes. Instead, you turned on each other. You lied, you hit, and you stole." "We can fix it, Lorenzo," Isabella pleaded, taking a step toward him. "We'll give it all back. Just come home." Lorenzo looked at the ruins of his first home and then back at his family. "You don't understand. The home you want to go back to is gone. I've already signed the papers. While you were driving here, I transferred every asset, every house, and every dollar to the only person who stayed loyal." "Who?" Bianca gasped. "Who could be more loyal than your own blood?" From the shadows behind Lorenzo, Martha stepped out. She was holding a legal tablet that glowed in the dark. "Blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does." The silence in the ruins was broken only by the sound of Bianca's heavy breathing. She looked at Martha, then at her father, her face twisting in disbelief. "The maid?" Bianca shrieked, her voice echoing off the charred walls. "You gave our inheritance to a woman who scrubs our toilets? You've lost your mind, Dad. The amnesia really did break you." Lorenzo didn't flinch. He leaned on his cane, watching them with eyes that felt like cold glass. "Martha didn't just scrub floors, Bianca. She watched over this family while I was building an empire. She saw the birthdays you missed. She heard the lies you told behind my back. While you were planning which car to buy with my blood money, she was the only one crying at my bedside." Enzo stepped forward, his face red with anger. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "This won't hold up in court. I'll call the lawyers. I'll tell them you're mentally unstable. I'll have this whole transfer canceled by morning." He pressed the call button for the family's head attorney. The phone rang once, twice, and then a recorded message played. "The number you are calling has been disconnected or is no longer in service." Enzo stared at the screen. "What? That's impossible. Mr. Sterling has been our lawyer for 20 years. Mr. Sterling was loyal to the Moretti name, but he was also loyal to the truth. When I showed him the footage of you shaking hands with Viktor Volkov, he realized he was representing traitors. He resigned tonight, but before he left, he helped me finish the paperwork." Isabella's knees buckled, and she sank onto a piece of burnt timber. The expensive silk of her dress was ruined by the soot and ash. "Lorenzo, please," she sobbed, reaching out a hand. "We are your blood. You can't leave us with nothing. Where are we supposed to go?" "You have the clothes on your backs, and you have each other. Isn't that what you told the priest at the funeral, that family is all that matters?" "We don't even have a place to sleep," Bianca cried, looking at the dark woods around them. Lorenzo turned his back on them and began walking toward a waiting car in the distance. Martha followed him, holding the tablet tightly. "Wait!" Enzo yelled, running after him. "You can't just walk away. We're the Morettis. We own this city." Lorenzo stopped and looked over his shoulder one last time. "No, Enzo, I own this city. And as of tonight, you are just 3 strangers standing in the rain. Don't bother coming to the mansion. The locks have already been changed, and the guards have been told if you step foot on the property, you are to be treated as intruders." The engine of the car roared to life, and as the headlights cut through the fog, Lorenzo's family stood in the dirt, penniless and alone in the shadows of the house they had helped destroy. The roar of Lorenzo's car faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of the wind whistling through the burnt ruins. Isabella sat on the dirty ground, her expensive jewelry sparkling mockingly in the moonlight. Enzo paced back and forth, kicking at the charred wood. "We have to do something," Bianca screamed, her voice cracking. "We can't just be poor. I don't even know how to use a bus." Enzo stopped suddenly. His eyes were dark and desperate. "There is one person who can help us, someone who hates Dad as much as we do right now." Isabella looked up, her face pale. "No, Enzo, not him. Your father spent 10 years keeping that man away from us." "Viktor Volkov," Enzo whispered. "He has the guns, he has the men. If we tell him Dad is alive and hiding at Martha's house, he'll take care of the problem. Then we can use the amnesia papers to take the money back before the banks realize what happened." "That's murder, Enzo," Bianca gasped, but she didn't look away. She was thinking about her designer bags and her fancy life. "It's survival," Enzo snapped. Before they could move, a pair of headlights cut through the fog. A black sedan pulled up, and Viktor Volkov himself stepped out. He was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. He had been following them. "I heard the old lion is back from the grave, and it sounds like he kicked his cubs out into the cold." "He took everything, Viktor," Enzo said, stepping toward the gangster. "But we know where he is. We can give him to you. All we want is our share of the empire back." Volkov looked at Isabella, then at Bianca. He chuckled darkly. "You would sell your own father to a man like me just to stay rich. You really are his children, aren't you?" Just then, a small speaker hidden in the ruins crackled to life. It was Lorenzo's voice again, but this time it sounded tired. "I am listening, Enzo," the voice said. The family froze. They looked around, realizing there were cameras hidden everywhere in the ruins. Lorenzo had been watching their final choice the whole time. This was the real test, Lorenzo's voice boomed. I wanted to see if when you lost everything, you would find your souls. I wanted to see if you would turn to each other for love or turn to a monster for greed. "Dad, wait!" Bianca cried out to the empty air. "You chose the monster," Lorenzo said. From the shadows of the trees, dozens of flashlights clicked on, but they weren't Volkov's men. They were the police. Behind them stood Martha and Lorenzo, watching from a safe distance. "Viktor Volkov is under arrest for conspiracy, and so are you three." Lorenzo stepped forward into the light. He looked at his broken children who were now being handcuffed. For a second he looked like he might cry. He was a father after all. But then he remembered the deal they'd just tried to make. "If I save you again, you will never change." The sirens faded into the distance, leaving the ruins of the Moretti estate in total silence. Lorenzo stood on the cracked stone porch, leaning heavily on his cane. He watched the red and blue lights disappear behind the thick trees. For the first time in 30 years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. He wasn't a Mafia boss anymore. He wasn't a dead man hiding in the shadows. He was just Lorenzo. Martha walked up beside him, handing him a warm coat. "It's over, Lorenzo," she said softly. "They will be in the city jail tonight. Volkov won't be able to help them. He's facing enough charges to stay locked up for a lifetime." Lorenzo looked at the charred ground where his children had just been standing. "I gave them every chance, Martha. I faked the amnesia to see if they had a heart. I faked the death to see if they had loyalty. In the end, they only had greed." "You didn't fail them," Martha said, her voice firm. "They chose their own path. You gave them a kingdom, and they tried to turn it into a cage." Lorenzo nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, old-fashioned key. It wasn't to a vault or a mansion. It was the key to a small farmhouse in the countryside, a place he had bought years ago and kept secret from everyone, even his wife. "What will you do with the money, sir?" Martha asked. "The accounts are all in your name again. You are the richest man in the state." Lorenzo looked at the digital tablet in Martha's hand. "Keep enough for us to live comfortably, Martha. You've earned a rest. As for the rest of it, build the hospitals I promised. Fund the schools in the dock districts. Give the workers the pensions they deserve. I want the Moretti name to mean something good for once." He turned away from the ruins and walked toward the car. He didn't look back at the black walls or the broken windows. He didn't think about the gold or the power he was leaving behind. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Lorenzo realized he had finally won. He didn't win by killing his enemies or stealing more gold. He won by finding the truth. He climbed into the passenger seat and looked out at the open road. The Iron Lion was gone, and in his place was a man who was finally free. "Let's go home, Martha," Lorenzo said with a small, tired smile. "The real home. This time there are no more tests."
If you like this story, please leave a like and drop a comment. Also, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next interesting story. We wish everybody watching a good health and light in our path.